That was British punk rap duo Bob Vylan expressing their support for Palestinians at Glastonbury, Britain's biggest music festival.
Bob Vylan further led the crowd in a chant of "Death, death to the IDF," referring to Israel's military, the Israel Defense Forces. The Trump administration sent a strong message against the band's inflammatory remarks by revoking their U.S. visas. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau wrote on X, "The State Department has revoked the U.S. visas for the members of the Bob Vylan band in light of their hateful tirade at Glastonbury, including leading the crowd in death chants. Foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors to our country."
Bobby Vylan, one of the performers, defended his remarks in an Instagram post on Sunday that was captioned, "I said what I said." Vylan wrote in his post in part, "Teaching our children to speak up for the change they want and need is the only way that we make this world a better place. Let us display to them, loudly and visibly, the right thing to do when we want change and need change."
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemned the chants at Glastonbury, saying there is no excuse for this kind of appalling hate speech. The BBC also apologized for continuing to live stream the performance after the remarks.
I would say a rather, well, I think that the outrage about this is kind of overdone. I know it is quite widespread. I don't personally, I mean, look, it's not something that I would go around chanting. It's an inflammatory thing to chant. It's directed at the Israeli military. There are obviously lots of reasons to be extremely critical of the conduct of the Israeli military, which has killed about 56,000 people since October 7th. And look, as far as Mr. Vylan and what he chanted there, you know, the distinction that, I mean, he is making that chant and getting vilified for it and has no real political power, has some pop culture influence perhaps, while there are people in the Israeli government who are showing no inclination to even remotely differentiate between civilians and combatants, who, you know, in the case of Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, has talked about Palestinian prisoners should be shot in the head, that food stores in Gaza should be bombed. Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister, is with Mr. Netanyahu charged with war crimes, partly because at the outset of the conflict he talked about we are fighting human animals and will act accordingly. Netanyahu, his arrest warrant stresses the idea that he allegedly intentionally directed an attack against a civilian population and used starvation as a method of warfare. So, look, it's not the kind of thing I would chant, but there are much bigger things to be outraged about in that conflict, in my opinion.
I have no problem with revoking this guy's visa. If you're chanting death to anyone, then I don't think you should get a free pass to come to the United States. This band was supposed to come and perform in November, including in Washington, D.C. Look, if he had even said, end the IDF, I think we'd be having a different conversation right now. And even in his comments from the stage, he said, quote, "Sometimes we have to get our message across with violence because that's the only language some people speak, unfortunately." So I don't want this person in the United States. You know, I think you could make probably the same argument about the U.S. military and service members, right? If you're going back to the acceptance of torture, for example, someone would maybe be justified in chanting death to people who tortured people at Guantanamo or in the service of the war in Afghanistan. But would we accept them saying death to the U.S. military or death to veterans? I think that he has undoubtedly crossed the line.
In relation to the State Department order, I mean, the State Department can do more or less, well, I was going to say can do whatever it likes. It can't do whatever it likes in all circumstances, obviously, but they can revoke a visa, and I think you can make the argument that this is sufficiently inflammatory. One thing that gets lost in all of this is it is very well established under international law that people who live under military occupation have a right to resist that occupation. Israel has illegally occupied the West Bank for decades and has been the effective occupying authority in Gaza for a very long time through blockades and the abrogation of various rights that would obtain to any free society. So I am less outraged, I think, than many people are by what he said And I think that that right is too often overlooked in these discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the problem there, or the distinction there, is that he's not living under occupation, right? He's a bystander, he's an observer from Britain. So him encouraging people to engage in violence, the crowd that he's speaking to are people who are not living under occupation. And so he's sharing these violent, inflammatory remarks with a crowd that he is intentionally trying to rile up, as he says, to speak violence because nobody else, these people won't understand a different language. I think it's pretty insane if you want my true opinion, and I'm glad he's not coming to the U.S.
I mean, I think we just fundamentally see the conflict through different lenses and therefore see the rhetoric around it through different lenses. Look, I'm not saying like that's a great thing to chant, like it's not something I would chant. It's not something that I think is all that helpful. But when you look at, I mean, there was an Israeli columnist for the Haaretz newspaper just on Sunday, Gideon Levi, talking about the horrendous scenes that we've seen at these food lines. And Levi, writing, as I say, for an Israeli news organization, notes that at least 549 people have been killed while waiting for food on the ostensible justification of maintaining order and just killing starving people. So look, among the rankings of things to get outraged about in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, I think what some rapper chants at Glastonbury is pretty low down.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm outraged about it. I just
you don't
want him to have a visa. Yeah.
That's certainly a legitimate view to hold.
He can say what he wants. And look, actually, I think the song kind of catchy. The performance was well done.
Sure.
But I thought it was insane.
Well, fair enough. We have differing views on that. Maybe we'll have the same views on whether we are proud or not to be an American. The father of the anthem, God Bless the USA, Lee Greenwood, might shutter this next story. We'll tell you why next.